The knock came at midnight, slow, deliberate, 3 raps that echoed too steady to be a drunk, too quiet to be a sheriff. Ethan Cole sat up in the bunkhouse, revolver already in his hand. Outside, wind clawed at the shutters, dragging grit across the boards like fingernails. Whoever was at the door didn't knock again. They waited. He swung the door open, with the pistol raised. Lantern light spilled out, catching the small shape hunched on his porch. A girl, mud-caked, dress torn, barefoot, her face streaked with dust and dried blood. She didn't speak, only stared past him, eyes wide as if he weren't even there. "Where'd you come from?" Ethan's voice was rough. No answer, just silence. She clutched a small leather satchel to her chest like it was life itself. Ethan glanced across the yard. Nothing but moonlit sagebrush and fence posts leaning into the night. No riders, no wagons, no tracks he could see. "You hurt?" he asked again, softer this time. She shook her head once, then stepped past him like she belonged inside. For a moment, Ethan stood frozen. He'd seen runaways before, orphans slipping off wagons, wives leaving cruel husbands, but something in her eyes wasn't running, it was hiding. He closed the door, set the revolver down, and poured her a tin cup of water. She drank like she hadn't seen water in days. Not a word escaped her, not even a name. By dawn, Ethan was still watching her from the corner of the room. She hadn't slept, just sat there clutching that satchel, staring into the dead fireplace. And that's when the first crack in the silence came, not from her lips, but from the world outside. Hoofbeats, distant but steady. A group, not a lone rider. The sound carried across the valley, closing in. Ethan's gut tightened. He knew trouble when it announced itself. He turned to the girl. Her hand squeezed the satchel so hard her knuckles went white. Still, she said nothing, just stared at him, pleading without words. Ethan blew out the lantern, heart thudding. The riders were coming closer, and suddenly he knew the girl wasn't just lost, she was being hunted. The hoofbeats stopped at his gate. Ethan stayed by the window, the barrel of his Colt peeking through the curtain's edge. Dust clouds rolled behind the riders as they slowed at his gate. 5 men, broad-shouldered, their coats dark and hats low. Even at a distance, their stillness carried weight. The girl hadn't moved. She sat cross-legged on the floor, clutching that satchel, her eyes locked on him like she was testing whether he'd betray her. One of the riders dismounted, boots crunching on gravel. He walked up to the porch and rapped the butt of his rifle against the rail. "Cole!" His voice was raw and commanding. "You seen a girl come through here? Small, travel-worn, been missing a week." Ethan didn't answer. His mouth went dry. The rider leaned in close to the door. "Best to speak plain, cowboy. Folks out here get hurt when you keep quiet." Behind him, another man spat in the dirt. "Ain't no girl that valuable unless she's hiding something," he muttered. Ethan's chest tightened. He glanced back at the girl. She hadn't spoken, but her whole body trembled. That satchel, whatever she carried, seemed heavier than her silence. "Cole!" the leader barked again. "Open up!" Ethan's jaw flexed. He'd spent years trying to keep his ranch free of trouble, lost enough friends to lawmen and outlaws alike. He could hand her over, wash his hands, and no one would blame him. Survival meant staying out of another man's storm. But those eyes, mud-streaked, desperate, holding something unsaid, dug into him deeper than any bullet. He whispered without turning, "If I keep you, it'll cost me." Still no answer, just her clutching that satchel. The men outside shifted in their saddles, impatience rising like the heat. Ethan exhaled through his teeth, made his choice, and barked toward the door. "Ain't no girl come through here, just me and my horse." A long silence followed. He could feel the men listening for the crack in his lie. Then the leader laughed, low and sharp. "You always were a stubborn one, Cole." Boots scraped against the porch. "Don't worry, we'll be back. Girl like that can't stay hid long." Hoofbeats thundered away, dust settling over the ranch. Ethan lowered his gun, shoulders tight. He turned back. The girl was staring at him, her lips parted, as if she might finally speak. Instead, she opened the satchel just a crack, just enough for him to glimpse what was inside. Stacks of banknotes, a fortune. And beneath them, a folded deed marked with the crest of the Harrington estate, the richest family in the territory. The girl was no runaway. She was the heiress everyone believed dead. "You're Harrington's girl," Ethan muttered, hardly believing his own words. The name tasted heavy in his mouth. Folks still whispered about the fire that had swallowed the Harrington mansion 2 months back, killing everyone inside. or so the story went. The girl's gaze flicked to him, urgent, begging him not to say more. Then her finger went to her lips. Silence. Before Ethan could press further, the sound of a hammer cocking broke the morning air. "Step real slow, Cole," a voice called from outside. Ethan froze. He hadn't heard anyone stay behind. Through the window, he saw a shadow by the barn. One rider hadn't left with the others, rifle aimed steady at the bunkhouse. "You lied," the man sneered. "Knew you would. Now, hand her over or I'll burn this place down while you watch." Ethan's stomach turned. His ranch was all he had left. Years of sweat and broken bones built it. But the girl? She tightened her grip on the satchel and slid closer to him, pressing her back to the wall. "Last chance," the man barked. Ethan pulled the girl behind the table, whispering fast, "Stay low. Don't move unless I tell you." The door rattled as the rifle butt slammed against it. Dust drifted from the rafters. Ethan's revolver felt heavier in his hand than it ever had before. The man outside laughed. "Thought you could fool us, Cole? Ain't no one keeps Harrington money without bleeding for it." That word, money, rang in Ethan's ears. So it wasn't just about finding a girl. They knew about the satchel. A flicker of movement caught Ethan's eye. The girl pointed toward the window opposite the barn, eyes wide. Another shadow. Another man creeping closer, shotgun ready. Ethan's blood iced. Two men, maybe more circling back. They weren't leaving. They were closing the noose. The girl grabbed his sleeve, her lips trembling. Finally, she forced out a whisper, hoarse, like her throat hadn't spoken in days. "Don't let them take me." Her voice shattered the silence between them, fragile yet certain. The barn man bellowed, "Time's up!" Glass shattered as the shotgun roared from the side window, pellets tearing splinters from the bunkhouse frame. Ethan yanked the girl to the ground, shielding her as smoke and dust filled the room. They were under siege, and there was no hiding anymore. The gunfire stopped as quickly as it started, leaving only the echo of the shot and the ringing in Ethan's ears. Dust swirled in the shafts of light, cutting through the bullet holes in the boards. The girl was curled beneath him, her face buried in his coat, trembling but alive. He pulled her up gently. "You hurt?" She shook her head, eyes wet, lips pressed tight. For the first time since she'd arrived, she looked less like a ghost and more like a child, lost, terrified, clutching a weight too heavy for her shoulders. Ethan crouched low, guiding her toward the back door. "They'll set fire next. Gotta move." But when he touched the satchel, trying to take it for ease, she ripped it back with surprising force. Her small hands clung to it as though letting go meant death. "It's not just money, is it?" he asked. Her silence cracked, voice rasping through clenched teeth. "It's proof." Ethan blinked. She loosened the flap just enough for him to see more. Letters signed with the Harrington seal. Ledgers marked in a trembling hand. Names and payments scrawled across pages. Not just family wealth, records, corruption. "My father," her words shook. "They killed him for this, burned it all, said I burned too." The weight of her truth pressed heavy on Ethan's chest. The Harrington fortune wasn't rumor, it was motive. Whoever hunted her wasn't chasing a lost heiress for ransom. They were tying up loose ends. Ethan let out a long breath, the kind that carried years of weary choices. "You're asking me to stand between you and men who don't mind killing whole families." Her eyes lifted to his, glassy but steady. "Please." Silence stretched, the kind that said more than words. He saw in her the same hollow look he once carried after burying his kin, an emptiness carved out by loss and lit only by the faintest ember of hope. Without thinking, he reached into his pocket, pulled out the small silver locket he always carried. Inside was the faded sketch of a woman long gone, his wife. He pressed it into the girl's hand. "Hold on to this. Remind yourself someone believed in you when the fire closes in." Her fingers curled around it, trembling, but something flickered in her eyes, a fragile spark of trust. Outside, a shout split the stillness. "They're round the back!" Boots crunched gravel. Firelight flickered against the far wall. The trap was closing, and the only way out was through. The bunkhouse door shuddered as men pressed in, boots grinding against the porch. Smoke began to curl in from the barn, set alight as promised. Ethan could feel the heat building, the crack of timbers giving way. He pulled the girl close, whispering, "Stay behind me. When I move, you run for the creek." Her eyes widened in terror, but she nodded, clutching both the satchel and his locket tight against her chest. The first outlaw kicked the door open, rifle raised. Ethan fired before the man even cleared the frame. The report was deafening in the small room, the outlaw crumpling with a shout. Gunfire erupted instantly, glass shattering as bullets screamed through every wall. Ethan dropped to a knee, returning shot for shot, the air thick with smoke and grit. "Run!" he barked, shoving the girl toward the back as another man lunged through the broken window. Ethan tackled him hard, fists cracking bone, before the man's head snapped against the table. The girl darted through the rear door, her small frame disappearing into the dark. Ethan followed, ducking low, revolver nearly empty. Flames lit the night sky, the barn collapsing in a thunder of sparks. Shadows of riders moved against the blaze, hunting. The creek lay ahead, moonlight glinting off its black water. He grabbed the girl's hand and they stumbled down the embankment, plunging into the icy shallows. Bullets hissed overhead, snapping through reeds. One outlaw spotted them, charging down with a shotgun. Ethan shoved the girl behind a fallen log, stood tall in the creek, and leveled. His last round. The shot rang true. Man toppled into the current, weapon lost. Silence, save for the crackle of burning wood behind them. The others, seeing their comrade fall, spurred horses and vanished into the smoke. They hadn't come for a fight. They'd come to erase a secret. With proof still in her hands, their fear was stronger than their fury. Ethan lowered the revolver, chest heaving. The girl crawled from behind the log, eyes wide, soaked but alive. She held out his locket with trembling hands. "You kept me safe, like she would have wanted." Ethan closed her fingers back around it. "No, you keep it now. Proof ain't the only thing worth carrying." Weeks later, word spread across the territory. The Harrington heiress lived. The ledgers revealed bribes, killings, and names once untouchable. Ethan never claimed reward nor title. He stayed on his ranch, quiet as ever. But some evenings, neighbors swore they saw a young woman riding the fence line, the silver locket flashing in the sunset. She would remember him not as the man who saved her fortune, but as the cowboy who believed her silence had meaning. The ranch, empty porch rocking chair creaking in the dusk wind, lantern burning steady against the dark.